the word of the Lord may have free course and be glorified even as it is with you, and that we may be delivered from unreasonable and wicked men, from all men, for all men have not faith. But the Lord is faithful, who shall establish you and keep you from evil. And we have confidence in the Lord touching you, that we both do and will do the things which we command you. And the Lord directs your hearts into the love of God and into the patience waiting for Christ. We can't really know the hearts of those around us, believers or non-believers. But one thing we know with absolute confidence is that God is always with us. That we always have his attention. We always have his focus and a strong spiritual protection. We can have confidence in God's ability to guard us. He's not going to allow any temptation that's too great for us. He's not going to allow Satan to do whatever he wants. God actively guards and establishes our lives. I'm going to look up the verse because I know I'm going to get it wrong halfway through. But 1 Corinthians 10, what is the verse? There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to men. But God is faithful. See, I knew it. I was going to mess up somewhere in the middle. Does anybody remember what verse that is? Because it's just hit me. I thought it was in 1 Corinthians 10. That'd be perfect. Do it. I don't know. That sounds right. Yes, thank you. But God is faithful, and he will not suffer you to be tempted above what ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that you may be able to bear it. That is such an incredibly powerful point. And God's work of establishing and guarding us is done in part through our obeying of his word. It's a two-way street. That's how spiritual maturity is gained. If I have a big bowl here, I'm making some spiritual dough. I mean, I'm pouring in my faith, I'm pouring in my cooperation. God's pouring in his love. He's pouring in his wisdom. He's pouring in his knowledge. That's how we grow. But God has such an active and focused part of our lives on a daily basis that whether that be a spiritual protection or even a physical push in one way or another, or even a physical protection. I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again. When I was 11 years old, I fell out of a tree and I fractured my back. And I was being an 11-year-old, I was climbing up as high as I possibly could, and I reached a point where I couldn't climb anymore. So the only thing I had left was a branch that was pretty far away in front of me, so I jumped for it. And it didn't work out the way I wanted it to. I fell down, I landed on my back, and I fractured my back pretty. It hurt, I can tell you that. But what struck me, even at 11 years old, even at the time, was the tree ran right down the side of a pretty tall rock wall, which I landed right next to. I mean, I landed here, the rock wall was here. And if I had landed on that rock wall instead of the soft grass, I probably would have been paralyzed, I probably would have been dead. And even at 11 years old, I recognized that was not coincidence. That was God's active hand of protection in my life. Daniel chapter 3. I'm moving kind of quickly, and for once that's actually on purpose. Daniel chapter 3. Most of us know this story, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to read the entire story. But the king, Nebuchadnezzar, built a great golden idol to himself, to his kingdom, and commanded that all those in his kingdom, when they hear the music, when they hear the flutes, were to bow down and to worship this idol. This was a direct commandment from the king, and the king was a god on earth. in the Babylonian Empire. His word was absolute, his word was law. But we know that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused. And then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It shows the sway that the king has on his people, that they were more afraid of their king than they were of the fire, to keep going to the point that the fire slew them as they placed these 3 men into the fire. That's a very powerful fear. That is true, not fear that we have for the Lord in the sense that we respect for what he is, but that is a terrible fear for what that man is and what he can do. Few men in history have the kind of power that King Nebuchadnezzar has here. Therefore, because the king, and these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonied, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake, and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire, and the princes, governors, and captains of the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was the hair on their heads singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the Lord God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own. God's active hand can be seen to the world through us. It's a powerful example to non-believers. It's a powerful testimony, the active protection that God has in our lives. It shows. And there's something about this, a detail about this story that's kind of overlooked, is that it is not told from the point of view of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's told from the point of view of the king himself. We see what's happening through his eyes. We don't even see the point where they refuse to bow down and worship the idol. What we see is the king's counselors coming to the king and telling him that they did not bow down to the idol. We see Nebuchadnezzar's fury and his rage. It's Nebuchadnezzar that sees the 4th man in the furnace. We don't even know if Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego saw the 4th man in the furnace. I don't know. Maybe he did, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But the king saw that. The king saw the power and protection that God had for his faithful servants. It was King Nebuchadnezzar who said that the form of the 4th is like the Son of God, which is something that he would not have even had any clue what that was a moment before. But when he saw it, there was no mistaking it. He knew exactly what he was looking at. He knew exactly what he saw. And we've had those moments in our lives where something has happened and we see that there is no way that this is anything but God moving in our lives. And those are very special moments, because it has a special power over us. We truly feel God's focus on us and God's love for us. And I can make that point. I can talk about that point, but as I said, we are talking about now. and what God is doing, and God is acting in our lives now. Come up here, LP. So I'm going to put a few people on the spot, but I want to hear from a few people about what God is doing, what God has done in your life. Moments in your life where there's no mistaking what's going on is, yeah, go ahead. Where there's no mistaking that what's happening in your life is truly, truly God's active hand in the present. What's that? Any circumstance. Whatever you feel.
Survive this. If it happens again, you will die. And I was like, okay, I got it. Like, thank you, I really appreciate you keeping me alive so I could see the days to be a mother. But that's the most prominent time in my life where God was very present. And also, whoever talks, you should probably talk back here. Sorry.
Miss Linda, could I ask the same of you? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I can bring this. But would you mind sharing a moment in your life, a time, an instance? It can be as personal or as simple. It doesn't matter, but something that really struck you.
Well, early on, after I got saved, we started going to church, and my husband was not as dedicated, shall we say, as I was, and I wanted to start tithing and give certain things up in our lifestyle, and he wasn't really on board with that. So I fasted and prayed, and we were having a revival at the church, and we went that night, and I had fasted all day for him. He didn't know it, that God would touch his heart about tithing and also about giving up cigarettes. And we went to church that night, and the pastor gave invitation at the end of his message, and Jean went forward, and I was anticipating what is that about. Well, when he got up there, he said, God has impressed upon me to start tithing and to give up my cigarettes. And I knew that God heard my prayer as a young Christian, and he was interested in our lives. That's how it was very encouraging to me as a young Christian to see that and the power of God, and that he was interested in my life.
Beautiful, thank you. Donna, can I ask the same of you? Sorry, but not sorry.
Yeah. I guess the first prominent situation that comes to mind is when my brother passed away that night. The Lord spent some time with me, some personal time with me, and I never felt him like that before. So it might have been a rough circumstance, but he showed himself to me. and I never would have experienced that if I hadn't have gone through losing my brother. We had a really tight relationship that I don't think only the Lord was privy to. And after that, he allowed me to talk to my brother in a dream as well to calm me. And I thought that was amazing.
Anybody else who wants to share? I really want us to kind of think as a community about how God is acting in our lives. Sir.
I'll make it short. It's a long story. 30-something years ago, over 30 years ago, I was highly addicted to alcohol. And I tried many, many times to quit. Nothing worked. One morning, I was on my hands and knees at 4:30 in the morning, crying like a baby, asking God to help me. So that night, I got a DUI. And that was the beginning where I started to give the alcohol up. The amazing thing is, I had gotten a check that day from the Navy for $139. It was in the glove box of my car, which I had totaled, and the highway patrolman let me go back down to the car to get the check. And that was the exact amount that I needed to be bonded out of jail to get back to the ship on time before I'd be UA. So I have no doubt in my mind that God answered my prayer that day. At the time, I thought it was the end of the world. It was just the beginning of a new phase of my life, and I've been clean and sober for over 30 years now. Had not been for that, I probably would have died.
Anybody else? I'm going to call one more person out, simply because I feel like they have a good one for this. Victoria, would you mind saying something?
I'm very blessed to have grown up in a home and in the church. This has allowed me a lot of exposure from very young. And just in the last, I'd say 10 years, kind of stepping into leadership roles, there has been a struggle of pride in my heart at times about those things. And that has been something that I've had to work with the Holy Spirit to deconstruct in my heart. And I'll never forget, I was at Teen Revolution, actually, of all places, and a teenager had asked me, she pulled me aside, panicking after a sermon, and said that she realized she needed to get saved, could I help her? And I said, yes, of course. And but then my second thought was, I can't wait for her to tell people that I led her to Christ. And I was immediately convicted. And while she prayed to get saved, I prayed a prayer of repentance. And I felt just as much comfort as I know she did, getting her eternity settled. And I've never forgotten that, because when pride tends to rear its head in my heart, the Lord gently reminds me of that time and how everything that I am allowed to do for His people is because He has allowed me to do that, and for no other reason.
It's amazing, too, the moments in our lives that we may not connect in that way at the time. Circumstances and instances and moments that we don't think of God active hand pushing in that direction, but that's exactly what it is. I was a teenager in a camp in North Carolina when I met my wife, and it was just, hey, you're cute, I'm going to talk to you. And I was a bad kid. I was a bad kid. The part of that story I may have left out is that I had a girlfriend. but those moments like that where you look back and you see the hand of God in your life, in your family, in your direction, and little moments that we can't even comprehend or imagine the effect that they have on the world. We have no idea. Yes, sir. You absolutely can. Absolutely. My wife is pregnant with our fourth child, and yeah, I keep bringing you up. I know, but we were due to basically take care of ever having any more children again this month, and she's pregnant. Here it is. Wow. But how can I even imagine or comprehend what's going to come of that? How can my mind truly comprehend where that's going to lead, what that child's going to become, how I'm going to raise that child or their children, or where those children go, or who those children teach, or what those children become, the effect that it can have. I can't comprehend such a thing. That's the power. That's active hand of God in our lives. That is His love for us. And the last point I want to make, which of any of this, I would ask that if you pray and meditate and consider what I've said, that this is the point that you would really focus on, is with God having such an active and powerful hand in our lives. How can we use our active hands to serve God? What can we do in return? And Titus 3:14, I want to make one specific point on that. And let ours also learn to maintain good works for necessary uses, that they be not unfruitful. This is a reoccurring theme throughout the book of Titus. Paul was concerned that we might be barren and unfruitful, but still have a confident assurance of our standing in the Lord. We can be so overly concerned sometimes with a prayer and a desire to find what God wants, what God's plan is for our life, for our whole life. What do you want for me, Lord? And that's a fantastic prayer, but we have to also think about, God, what do you want from me here, now, today? Because God's plan for us may change. Circumstances change. And as we've already talked about, God certainly speaks to us through circumstance. God speaks to us through His Word. He speaks to us through the Spirit. And He certainly speaks to us through circumstance. And sometimes the need in and of itself is God calling us. Sometimes God does share with us exactly what His plan is for our life, but not always, not with everybody. Whether you're 50 or 32 or 19, God doesn't change, but how God can use us in the circumstance and situation that we are in now absolutely can change. What is the urgent need now that we can fill? God may not give us the entire picture, but we can trust that God has a picture. He has a plan for us, absolutely, but He may not share it with us, not entirely, because frankly, God is trustworthy, but we're not. I have no idea what I'm having for dinner tonight. I mean, I got some leftover corned beef from yesterday. That might work. I could pull something. Maybe we'll go out. I have no idea. I have no idea. That's just a few hours away. But God knows everything. We can trust that God will hold that plan for us. And we can ask God how can we be fruitful today? Pastor, when did you first start this church? I can't remember the year. 84. I mean, your calling as a preacher has not changed since 84, but certainly, I'm sure, I wasn't here, I wasn't even born yet. I'm sure that the way the church operates has changed with time. I mean, certainly, the outreach has certainly changed. I'm sure you weren't live streaming to Facebook in 1984. Situation and circumstances change, and what's the immediate need that we can fill? I said this one time like a year ago when I was teaching, and I keep saying it. It's not always about what's good. A lot of times it's about what's best. What can we do for God now? What is the best that we could do for God here and now? Because, well, what He has done for us greatly outweighs anything that we can give in return. That love is an astonishing and powerful love. And never forget that God is here. God is not just sitting up there waiting for us to come to Him. God is here in us, and He is here in this room, and He is next to us, and He is out there, and He is working. And how can we work too? How can we use Him to better fulfill whatever plan He has for our lives and in this moment?